Hey guys, it's Signal. Today I'm going to be showing you how to build a NAS, or a network attached storage device, for free or really cheap, depending on if you have an old computer lying around or not. And FreeNAS is built on FreeBSD, which is an operating system. And if you've used pfSense or OpenSense, or OPNSense I think is actually how you say it, you'll be right at home when it comes to FreeNAS. So let's get started. I'm going to be using an old Dell Optiplex that I have, and yeah, we're going to have some fun. But before we begin, here are the system requirements for FreeNAS. You need an 8GB boot device. Ooh, almost dropped it. You need an 8GB boot device with 16 gigs being recommended. I have two USBs here. One, I'm pulling a Linus. Anyways, you need an 8GB boot device with 16GB being the recommended. This is going to be my boot device. This is just a 16GB flash drive. This is the flash drive I'm going to use to actually install FreeNAS, so you need two USBs. You can use other drives as boot devices, but they won't be able to be used as part of the storage pool. So if you have two hard drives, install FreeNAS onto one of them, that drive won't be able to be used as part of the storage pool at all. So they highly recommend having a separate flash drive as your boot device. You can use cheap SSDs that are like low capacity as a solid option. That is better than a USB, but most people just have a USB lying around. You're going to need a minimum of 8 gigs of RAM, with 16 gigabytes being the recommended amount for larger storage pools. A good rule of thumb, according to them, is about 1 terabyte equals 1 gigabyte of RAM. So if you have a terabyte of storage, you can get by with 1 gig of RAM, but don't do that. Have at least 8. 16 is even better, but yeah. Next, you're going to need at least a 64-bit CPU for the newer versions of FreeNAS. You can run 32-bit computers on older versions of FreeNAS. I believe the latest version is 9 point something or other, but we're on 11 now, so use a 64-bit machine. Most old computers now at this point are also 64-bit, so you should be fine. This isn't the computer I'm going to be using directly, but it's just kind of to demonstrate. You're also going to need directly connected hard drives directly to the motherboard. RAID cards are not supported. Well, they're supported to some extent, but really not recommended. You're also going to need a 1 gigabyte or 10 gigabyte network card. You can get by on 100 meg. Unfortunately, I am stuck with 100 meg just because of my router, not necessarily my hardware. So this will just determine how fast you can pull data on your LAN, assuming all of your devices are connected by Ethernet. So if you have at least a gig switch or a gig router, it should be fine.
Let's start by creating the install USB. First, head over to freenas.org and click the blue download button. When asked about the newsletter, just hit "No thank you, send me the download page please." Grab the latest stable version of FreeNAS. As of recording, this is 11.2-U6. While that is downloading, go to rufus.ie and click where it says Rufus 3.8 under the download box. Rufus updates a lot, so it might say 3.9 or even 4.0 by the time you're doing this. With our FreeNAS ISO and Rufus downloaded, let's go ahead and open Rufus. Select your flash drive from the Devices dropdown, then click Select, locate your ISO and double-click it, then hit Start, then OK. When it is done, it will say Ready with a green bar. Once it is done, just hit Close and unplug your flash drive. Let's take a look at the machine we're working with. It's a Dell Optiplex 3010. It looks like the slim form factor variant. Just looking at the case, it's a little dusty. Taking a look inside, it's really dusty. I spent about 15 minutes wiping this thing off. It looks much better. If we take a look in the BIOS, it has an Intel i3-3220 and 8 gigs of RAM. I went ahead and upgraded it to 16 gigs of RAM because more RAM doesn't hurt and I just have it lying around. There's also a 250 gig hard drive that I'm going to keep in there, but I'm also adding a 750 gig one too, so we'll have about 1 terabyte of storage for this thing. Let's grab our two USBs and install FreeNAS. One USB is the installer, the other I'm using as a boot device. Like I said, if you pick a hard drive as the boot device, then that hard drive cannot be used as part of the storage pool at all. Set the boot order on the motherboard BIOS to boot from USB first, and we should be good to go. If you're experiencing issues getting the USB to boot, make sure you created the bootable USB the right way using Rufus, and double check your boot order. Most PCs will allow you to manually select what device to boot from if you press a key like F9, for example. This depends greatly on the PC you're using. You should be booting into FreeNAS at this point. When you see the menu screen, go ahead and press 1. Wait a minute for it to load to the installer. Once you're at the installer, press 1 to install the OS. The next screen will ask where you want to install FreeNAS. The top 2 on my list are my hard drives. I can tell just based on capacity. I want to install the OS onto my USB, which is the SanDisk Cruiser Glide. Highlight your install drive and press space, and it should tick it. Then press OK. Then hit yes. Make the password whatever you want. When it asks you to boot via UEFI or BIOS, this is where you'll have to figure out what kind of motherboard you're using. My FreeNAS computer is on an older Optiplex machine, so for me, it is a safer bet to choose BIOS. Now give it 5 to 10 minutes to install. Once it's done, you should see a list of options as well as the IP address of the NAS. This IP is what you'll type in to enter the web interface of FreeNAS. Before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and change the IP address of my NAS to a static one so I can always access it with the same address. This is purely optional. If you want to do it, hit 1, press enter, select an interface, in my case 1, press enter, then no, no, and no. Say yes to configure IPv4, then hit enter when it asks for an interface name. It should already be selected. Then type in the IP address. I'm going to make mine 192.168.2.5. Then for my network, my net mask is 24. Yours is probably 2. Lastly, I'm going to hit no for IPv6. Now the list should show up again and show a different address. Now let's head on over to the PC to connect to it. So this is our dashboard for FreeNAS, and you'll see that we have some system information up here in this corner, this little box. We got the version of FreeNAS we're using, our CPU, our RAM, blah blah blah, even uptime, which is pretty cool. But we don't really need to worry about this right now. You can even check for updates, so you can update FreeNAS through this. And we're going to go ahead and go over to the accounts page and hit groups. There's a whole bunch of groups that come with it. You don't really need to worry about these. Go ahead and hit add. Keep the GID the same. They usually say to leave this alone. I'm going to make the group called admin. I'm going to go ahead and check permit sudo and hit save. That will create us an admin group, which will be useful later. I'm going to go ahead and users. So we're signed in as the root user right now, but I'm going to go ahead and hit add and type in name. Yep. Email doesn't really matter. It shouldn't matter anyways. Yeah, that's not required. Make the password whatever. And we don't need a new primary group. We already made a group, so we can uncheck that and hit admin for our primary group. And since I'm an admin, I want to have all privileges for everything, so I'm checking all these boxes here and also permitting sudo. Now, I'm using a Windows 10 machine, so I'm going to go ahead and check this Microsoft account thing, and it even says set to allow additional username authentication methods when the user is connecting from a Windows 8 or newer machine. And I'm using this FreeNAS server for two things, one being a backup of video files and the other being a backup of my boot drive. So I'll kind of explain more of the setup stuff there once we get into the pools and stuff like that, and even some limitations of FreeNAS. But yeah, so I'm going to check Microsoft account and hit save. If you're running Mac or whatever, the process is a little different for how you should be configuring FreeNAS. I'll have the full official documentation for FreeNAS down below in the description. But this is just kind of how I'm setting it up and how I'm using it. I'm really not great with FreeNAS. This is actually the first time I've really messed with it. So don't take everything I say as being 100% true. I'll probably find out, oh, hey, I messed this part up or this part up. This is just kind of my journey through setting up FreeNAS and getting it all figured out. And I'm using it for a specific use case. You might have a different reason to be using it. So anyways, now that we have the user and group created, we can go ahead and go over to this storage tab here and hit pools. And it'll even tell us that we have no pools. So currently, there's no storage attached to this right now at all. So if I go ahead and hit add, we're going to create a new pool. I'm going to go ahead and name it. This is going to be my video backup, so I'm going to make the name video. Now, a limitation with FreeNAS, well, honestly, it's not even really a limitation with FreeNAS. The ZFS file system that they use is that if I check both of these and move them over, you would think, okay, I have 900 gigs of storage, but it says 230 here. It'll only use the lowest capacity disk. They recommend to not mix disk sizes up at all. This is just what I have lying around, so I'm just going to deal with the limitation. Again, I'm using it for kind of different reasons, so I can kind of work around this a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to check this one, move it back. So we're going to have just one pool that's about 700 gigs. And this is going to be the pool I use to back up my media stuff from my computer here. So I have just a second place to save all of my video stuff, because that's stuff I don't want to lose. So I'm going to go ahead. I don't really need it encrypted or anything like that. I'm not really worried about it. Again, I'm on like a home network. I'm doing a very I don't really need this to be super crazy. It can be very simple. So I'm going to go ahead and create this pool. It's going to remind me that, hey, it's going to erase the disk completely. I'm okay with that. So I'm going to create the pool and give it a few minutes, a few seconds really. And we have a pool. Now I'm going to go ahead and create another pool for my other disk. And the same process, except this is going to be, I'm going to name it boot backup. And they recommend to make names that aren't anything super generic, because that way in error logs and stuff like that, this will stand out and you won't, it'll just be easier to find. So then I'm just going to move that over and hit create. Yep, I'm okay with you erasing the disk. And I might make multiple parts to this FreeNAS thing, just off and on. If I find something cool that I've done with it and want to share it, then I will. But this is just a very basic setup. You can even get into the whole network thing. You can do lots of permissions with the group and users thing. So if you have a bunch of people accessing this and you want to limit what parts of your filing structure they have access to, you can do that. We're gonna go ahead and go to sharing, and I'm wanting to create a Windows SMB share, since I'm using a Windows computer and pretty much all my main computers are all Windows. So go ahead and hit add here. The path, we can click this little folder here. This stumped me for a while. I was trying to think, what the hell am I supposed to type into the path? So I was trying shit like test and stuff like that. But no. You can click this little thing here, hit this, drop it down, and so for one share, I'm going to make it my video share, so I can just click that, and then bam, it's got the path there. So I'm gonna go ahead and save this. It should create the share. It's going to ask me if I want to enable the SMB service. By default, it's disabled for security reasons, but since I'm using Windows everything in my house pretty much, I'm going to go ahead and enable the service. But if you even see over here on the left-hand side, you've got stuff for Unix-based, and even if you want to create an Apple time machine, you can do that with FreeNAS, which is pretty cool. So if you have a Mac that you want to back up, then you can definitely do that. So as you can see, we have our video share here. Now, in theory, yep, okay. So now in theory, I can go ahead and open up File Explorer. I'm gonna bring it over here. I can type in // the IP of my computer. I've already typed it in, so it's there. And it's going to ask me for my credentials. So now I'm going to sign in using that user I created. So I made the username signal and made a password. And I'm going to have it remember them. If I hit connect, there we go. We see the video share right there. And it doesn't have access, which is fine, because what we have to do, if we go to storage pools, go to the one that we've got shared and drop it down, we can hit these three buttons, edit permissions, and as you can see, it even says Windows, and we're going to go ahead, and I don't want to apply any changes to a specific user. This is what I created that group for. So there it is. If I drop it down, admin, and hit save, it should give me access to that pool. Now that, yep. So now I'm able to create folders in it and do all that. I'll kind of show you what I'm actually going to use this for here in a minute. We're going to go ahead and do the same thing with our boot backup. However, we need to share it first. So let's go ahead and go to sharing, Windows SMB shares, add one, path, do the same thing, boot backup, go ahead and hit save. There we go. Go back to storage, pools, boot backup, edit permissions, uncheck apply user. We want to apply this to a group, admin. I could have just made one user and made it me and then just had it apply to the user, but in case I ever want to add or remove people, you know, it's just kind of a good habit to get into, in my opinion, is to just have groups for things. So you can add and remove people from the groups, and then you don't have to go and change permissions individually. So now that we have both of our shares, if I go to my file explorer, I can even go down here and hit network, and FreeNAS shows up right there. In theory, it should let me connect. Oh, okay. But if I go here, it shows up. The other one should show up too. I'm not entirely sure why it's doing that. It just didn't originally show because it wasn't loaded. Just an FYI, once you go back to the dashboard after creating these pools, you have two nice little things, or one, depending on how many pools you have. So I have two, so I see two here. Nice little indicators, and you can even get reports for disk usage, disk times, if there's anything wrong with them. You can have it automatically run smart checks on the disks every, so often, which is pretty cool. All right, before I go into my Windows 10 settings, I'm going to go ahead and map this as a network drive so I don't have to constantly type in that IP address. So if you don't know how to do that, you can go up here, map network drive, and I'm going to go ahead and make it, let's make it S, or you know what? Yeah, we'll make it V for video. Let's do that. And then it's going to ask me to browse, except that one's not reachable, so it's not going to show anything. If I do // 192.168.2.5 /video and hit finish, there we go. We have our V drive. So now that shows up as a network drive, and I can also do the same thing for the boot backup, which I'll just make my B drive. Why not? So we're going to do 192.168.2.5 /boot backup and hit finish. Now that also shows up. So now we have a 222 gigabyte storage pool and a 674 gigabyte storage pool, which is pretty cool. And I can do what I want with these. I can add files in here manually if I wanted to, but I'm going to go ahead and let Windows 10 kind of do it for me. This is going to be my offload my computer files over to a smaller storage place, because like I have this entire drive that I'd like to back up here, just so I have extra, just so I have a backup of things. My game drives I don't really care about, because I can just re-download all that stuff. But my boot drive and my media drive are the two drives I care about and don't want to have to really reinstall everything on, because it'll be harder. So I'm going to go ahead and back up this my C drive to the boot backup file share, and the media one to this one. So just a warning, make sure you have 1 gig on your LAN, a 1 gigabit LAN connection, recommended. If you don't, it'll work. I'm kind of in that situation right now. My router only goes up to 100 meg on the Ethernet switches, or 100 megabit. I keep saying 100 meg even though it's megabit. So it'll be slower when it comes to backups and transferring files from between computers and stuff like that. So 1 gig LAN definitely recommended. 10 gig if you're somehow able to get that. That's not nearly as common on a home network as 1 gig is. But yeah, definitely go for 1 gig on your LAN if you can. And definitely make sure you hardwire your devices, especially if you're transferring large amounts of data, because doing that over Wi-Fi is not pretty. Anyways, you're going to go to Settings, Update and Security, then Backup. Hit add a drive. It'll search for drives. Maybe it just takes, there it is, video. And I'm going to hit more options so we can be very specific with how we want to do this. I don't need to back up that much every hour. I'm going to do it daily. Honestly, if I could, I'd do it probably every 2 days or weekly or something like that. We'll just leave that alone for now. I can change that later. And since this is for my video stuff, I'm going to remove all of these folders. This is going to take a while. Okay, so now that I removed all those folders, I'm going to go ahead and hit add a folder. And I literally just want it to be this media folder in my media drive. I don't really care about my programs because I can re-download those. So media, choose that folder. And we can even exclude folders, but I don't really see a point for my media drive. I want everything inside of there to be backed up. That'll back it up every day. So now once my media stuff is backed up, that folder disappeared. Let me fix that. So once I have that one set up, I'm going to go ahead and we're going to go into the control panel. Go to System and Security, Backup and Restore. I'm going to set up a backup. Save on a network location, / 192.168.2.5 / boot network credentials, sign into it. So just use whatever. Okay, and it's saying other people on the network might be able to access your backup. Well, that's fine by me for a home network. Don't do something like that if you know. So I'm gonna go back and make sure, yep, that's on the right spot. Windows backup data files, saved on the desktop, default Windows folders, create a system image. Yeah. I'm gonna go ahead and hit let me choose. And I don't really need backup data for newly created stuff. I just need my local disk and my user. Yep. And I'm okay with knowing that a system repair disk might be required to restore a system image. So every Sunday at 7 p.m. by default is when it will do a complete image backup of my computer. You know what? Weekly's fine by me. Except I'm gonna do it Sunday at, let's do 3 a.m. Hit OK. Just gonna hit save settings and run backup. And now, currently, it is going to back up and create a system image of my C drive. And then I also have my video files being backed up to the other hard drive. So it's always good to have backups of things, and this is just one way to do it. So, like I said, there's a lot to do with FreeNAS, and honestly, I do not have time to go through and cover it all in one video. Like I said, there's stuff you can mess with network-wise, configure the interfaces that way. You can add plugins. You can, like I said, do Apple shares. You can, change around the pools. You can even go into the shell and you can even do commands directly through there. So I know I've read a few articles where if you really want to combine the storage onto one pool with different size drives, you can partition them a certain way to make it work like that. I don't really want to fool with it, and honestly having them separated works out for me anyways, because then I have one for backing up my boot drive and then one just for my video stuff. So how I have it set up works fine for me. You're going to have to definitely mess around with it. Like I said, official documentation will be in the description. If you need help with something, honestly, I won't be able to help a ton. I'm not super familiar with this. I just wanted to set up something for my specific use case. So the documentation should hopefully answer most of your questions. Doing some Googling around should also be able to help you answer some questions. And so, yeah. Thank you guys for watching. I hope this was kind of an interesting video, maybe somewhat helpful. I'm sorry that this isn't a crazy in-depth tutorial. This is very surface level FreeNAS stuff. I might make a more in-depth one at some point once I'm more familiar with this. But yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care.